experience in acquisition reform.
I've written about and studied on acquisition reform.
Have you actually done it?
Because what we need in the hands of our warfighters better change, because we're not doing it well right now.
It better, and we need people who have experience actually doing that. You know, you talk about standards. Again, I'm going to go back to CEO of the most complex organization in the world. I don't think there's a board of directors in America that would hire you as a CEO with the kind of experience you have on your resume. You talk about standards. You talk about raising or lower. We have a problem of standards in the DoD, and we have to raise standards for the men and women who serve. Do you think that the way to raise the minimum standards of the people who serve us is to lower the standards for the Secretary of Defense? That we have someone who has never managed an organization more than 100 people is going to come in and manage this incredibly important organization and do it with a professionalism and has no experience that they can tell us that they have actually done that? I have real problems with that. This is not about other issues that are brought up. They're all very important. I'm just about trying to get things done, managing efficiently, and having the best people who have demonstrated that in a large organization. And I'm sorry, but I don't see that in your background. There are a lot of other things you can do very well. You're a capable person, but you have not convinced me that you're able to take on this tremendous responsibility with a complex organization and having little or no significant management experience.
Senator, I'm grateful to be hired by one of the most successful CEOs in American history, should I be confirmed.
Mr. Hegseth, it seems to me that you've supervised far more people than the average United States Senator supervises today. And
except for former governors, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Mullen, I understand you are yielding back your time and do not wish to ask questions. I was misinformed. Senator Mullen?
Okay.
That's right.
Caught me totally off guard there. I'd like to submit for the record signatures by 32 members of the House of Representatives who are veterans. The signatures call on the Senate to honor the constitutional duty of advise and consent by conducting a fair, thorough confirmation process that evaluates his nomination solely on the substance and merits. His distinguished military service, academic credentials, and a bold vision for revitalizing the national defense. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record.
Without objection.
You know, there's a lot of talk going about talking about qualifications and then about us hiring him if we are the board, but there's a lot of senators here I wouldn't have on my board because there is no qualifications except your age, and you got to be living in the state and you're a citizen of the United States to be a senator. Other than the fact we got to convince a lot of people to vote for us. And then when we start talking about qualifications for if you're qualified for it, could the chairman tell me what the qualifications are for the Secretary of Defense? Mr. Chairman, could you tell me what the qualifications are for the Secretary of Defense?
I'd be happy
I'll read
for
it.
you to do that. Yeah.
Let me read it for you because I
was getting some advice from my second in command.
Yeah, but I'm just making a point because there's a lot about qualifications, and I think it's so hypocritical of senators, especially on the other side of the aisle, be talking about his qualifications, not going to lead the secretary or be the Secretary of Defense, and yet your qualifications aren't any better. You guys aren't any more qualified to be the senator than I'm qualified to be the senator, except we're lucky enough to be here. But let me read you what the qualifications of the Secretary of Defense is, because I Googled it, and went through a lot of different sites, and really it's hard to see. But in general, the U.S. Secretary of Defense position is filled by a civilian. That's it. If you have served in the U.S. Army Forces and have been in the service for, you have to be retired for at least 7 years, and Congress can weigh that. And then there's questions that the senator from Massachusetts brought up about serving on a board inside the military industry, and yet your own secretary that you all voted for, Secretary Austin, we had to vote on a waiver because he stepped off the board of Raytheon. But I guess that's okay because that's a Democrat Secretary of Defense. But we so quickly forget about that. And then Senator Kaine, or well, I guess I better use the senator from Virginia, starts bringing up the fact that what if you showed up drunk to your job? How many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night? Have any of you guys asked them to step down and resign from their job? And don't tell me you haven't seen it, because I know you have. And then how many senators do you know have got a divorce before cheating on their wives? Did you ask them to step down? No. But it's for show. You guys make sure you make a big show and point out the hypocrisy because a man's made a mistake. And you want to sit there and say that he's not qualified? Give me a joke. I mean, it is so ridiculous that you guys hold yourself as this higher standard and you forget you got a big plank in your eye. We've all made mistakes. I've made mistakes. And Jennifer, thank you for loving him through that mistake. Because the only reason why I'm here and not in prison is because my wife loved me too. I have changed, but I'm not perfect. But I found somebody that thought I was perfect. And for whatever reason, you love Pete, and I don't know why. But just like our Lord and Savior forgave me, my wife's had to forgive me more than once too, and I'm sure you've had to forgive him too. And so thank you. So before I go down this rabbit hole again, tell me something about your wife that you love.
She's the smartest, most capable, loving, humble, honest person I've ever met. In addition to being incredibly beautiful.
Don't forget about your kids.
I'm supposed to talk about my kids?
No, well, she's also the mother.
Oh, an amazing mother.
Yes.
Of our blended family of 7 kids.
Brother, I'm pulling you along. I'm trying to help you here. You know, do you believe that you're going to be running the Secretary or the Department of Defense by yourself?
Senator, absolutely not. Just as President Trump is assembling his cabinet, I look forward and already am in the process of building one of the best possible teams you can imagine, with decades and decades of experience outside of the Pentagon, driving innovation and excellence, and also inside the building, knowing how to make it happen. Yes, sir.
So, in your organizations that you did have the privilege of running, did you have a board that
In both organizations, we had a board, yes.
Okay, and what did you do with that board? What kind of decisions did you make with them?
Those boards provided oversight and insight into decision-making.
They all have special, unique sets that maybe filled gaps that you're not the expertise in?
Yes, sir.
So do you believe you're capable of surrounding yourself with capable individuals that you're going to be able to run those same ideas by, and surround yourself with people that are smarter and better equipped in maybe areas that you don't necessarily carry those expertise with?
Senator, the only reason I've had success in life, to include my wonderful wife, is because of people more capable around me and having the self-confidence to empower them and say, hey, run with the ball, run with the football, take it down the field. We'll do this together. I don't care who gets the credit. And in this case, that's how the Pentagon will be run.
Let's end with this, Mr. Chairman, about the qualifications. You got a man who has literally put his butt on the line, who served 20 years in the service, multiple deployments, has heard the bullets crack over the top of his head, has been willing to go into combat, been willing to see friends die for this country, and he's willing to still put himself through this. His wife is willing to still stand beside him, knowing he wasn't perfect, knowing that all this was going to be brought up, and he's still willing to serve the country. What other qualifications does he need? That I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Mullen. Senator Duckworth. And again, we really are going to strictly enforce the rule about no demonstrations or noise. The distinguished ranking member.
Just a point of personal privilege to make a correction. The reason that General Austin required a waiver was not because of his participation in a corporate enterprise. It was because he did not have 7 years of interruption between his service and his appointment. Second point is that if any of us were appointed as Secretary of Defense, we would be subject to the same types of questions, and the case in point is Senator John Tower was nominated for Secretary of Defense. It was discovered by his colleagues that his behavior was not commensurate with the responsibilities despite his service, and he was voted down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Duckworth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also, Secretary Mattis had to have this waiver as well. Mr. Hegseth, this hearing is about whether you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense, and one of the qualifications, to answer my colleague's question, is to actually win the votes of every member of this committee and to be confirmed by the United States Senate. And you need to convince us that you're worthy of that vote, because the people of the state of Illinois voted for me to be their senator so that I could cast that vote when it comes to picking who is going to be the next Secretary of Defense. This hearing now seems to be a hearing about whether or not women are qualified to serve in combat, and not about whether or not you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense. And let me just say that the American people need a SecDef who's ready to lead on day one. You are not that person. Our adversaries watch closely during times of transition, and any sense that the Department of Defense that keeps us safe is being steered by someone who's wholly unprepared for the job puts America at risk, and I am not willing to do that. With that in mind, Mr. Hegseth, I want you to try to explain to the American people, this committee, who have to vote for you, and to our troops who are deployed around the world, why you are qualified to lead the Department of Defense. We already know that you've only led the largest, a 200-person organization. We already know that you so badly mangled a budget that after you left, they had to bring in a forensic accountant to figure out what went wrong. And that the largest budget you ever managed was about $18 billion. You know, that is about 51,560 times lower than the Department of Defense budget of $825 billion. $16 million is 51,568 times smaller than the defense budget. Please describe to me, Mr. Hegseth, you talk about DOD passing an audit. Please describe to me a time or an organization when that you led underwent an audit, because you say you're going to hire smarter people than you to run this audit. I'm not asking you to be an accountant. I want you to be able to tell me what kind of guidance will be given to those employees, what will happen whether or not you pass that audit. Have you led an audit of any organization, yes or no? I don't want a long answer, yes or no. Have you led an audit of any organization of which you were in charge?
Senator, in both of the organizations I ran, we were always completely fiscally responsible.
Yes or no, did you lead an audit?
And the way
yes
my
or no, did you lead an audit?
Stated,
yes or no?
Completely
what are you afraid of? You can't answer this question. Yes or no, did you lead an audit? Do you not know this answer?
Senator, every
yes
part of my leadership of these organizations has been misrepresented.
I will take that as a no. What were the findings? So there were no findings because you've never led an audit. What guidance did you give the auditors? None, because you've never led an audit. Nobody expects you to be an accountant, Mr. Hegseth. What we expect is for you to understand the complexity of this Pentagon budget process that is absolutely necessary to outfit our warfighters. Look, the Secretary of Defense is required to make quick decisions every single day that, well, with high-level information that's being provided for them. A Secretary of Defense has to have breadth and depth of knowledge. Right now, I am concerned that you have neither. Mr. Hegseth, what is the highest level of international negotiations that you have engaged in, that you have led in? Because the Secretary of Defense does lead international security negotiations. There are three main ones that the Secretary of Defense leads and signs. Can you name at least one of them?
Could you repeat the question, Senator?
Sure. What is the highest level of international security agreement that you have led? And can you name some that the Secretary of Defense would lead? There's three main ones. Do you know?
I have not been involved in international security arrangements because I have not been in government other than serving in the military. So my job has been to
no. The answer is no. Can you name one of the three main ones that the Secretary of Defense
talking about defense arrangements, I mean, NATO might be one that you're referring to.
Status of Forces Agreement would be one of them.
Status of Forces Agreement. I've been a part of teaching about Status of Forces Agreements.
But you don't remember to mention it? You're not qualified, Mr. Hegseth. You're not qualified. You talk about repairing our defense industrial complex. You're not qualified to that. You could do acquisition and cross-servicing agreements, which essentially are security agreements. You can't even mention that. You've done none of those. You talked about the Indo-Pacific a little bit, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Can you name the importance of at least one of the nations in the ASEAN, and what type of agreement we have with at least one of those nations? And how many nations are in ASEAN, by the way?
I couldn't tell you the exact amount of nations in that, but I know we have allies in South Korea and Japan and in AUKUS with Australia, trying to work on submarines with them.
Mr. Hegseth, none of those countries are in ASEAN.
Across.
None of those 3 countries that you've mentioned are in ASEAN. I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations. Listen, Mr. Hegseth, we ask our troops to go into harm's way all the time. We ask them to go into harm's way. And this behind me is a copy of the Soldier's Creed, a copy that usually hangs over my desk here in the Senate, and you should be familiar with it. It's the same copy that hung over my desk at Walter Reed every single day that I woke up and fought my way back because I wanted to go back and serve next to my buddies who'd saved my life. This same copy, these words are repeated over and over and over again. And let me read out 2 things to you, 2 sentences. I will always place the mission first, and I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained and proficient in my warrior task. Mr. Hegseth, our troops follow these words every single day, and they man up and they pack their rucksacks and they go to war, and they deserve a leader who can lead them, not a leader who wants to lower the standards for himself or raising the standards for other people. And by the way, our troops already meet the standards. We ask troops to man that ship, fight that fire, fly that helicopter until their very last breath. And they do that every single day. They cannot be led by someone who's not competent to do the job. How can we ask these warriors to train and perform the absolute highest standards when you are asking us to lower the standards to make you the Secretary of Defense simply because you are buddies with our president-elect? And by the way, he has filed for bankruptcy 6 times. I'm not quite sure he's the kind of CEO you want to refer to as a successful businessman. Let me make it clear. You can't seem to grasp that there is no U.S. military as we know it without the incredible women that we serve. Women who've earned their place in their units. You have not earned your place as Secretary of Defense. You say you care about keeping our armed forces strong and that you like that our armed forces are meritocracy. Then let's not lower the standards for you. You, sir, are a no-go at this station.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. I would like to submit for the record
And we just heard there from Pete Hegseth as well as senators who are weighing whether he should lead the Department of Defense. He is President-elect Donald Trump's pick. And senators from both parties, you just heard Tammy Duckworth there, a Democrat from Illinois and a veteran of the armed forces. They are weighing in on this nomination. Hegseth is a former Fox News host. His selection is bringing out some unusual division on this panel. And for that, we're going to bring in my colleague, national political reporter Taylor Popolars. So, Taylor, it's a closely divided Senate. Republicans narrowly in charge. What can you tell us so far about what we have seen?
Weekly meetings.
Well, as this hearing has gone on for several hours, Josh, it's become very clear that at least for the Democratic members of this committee, the Senate Armed Services Committee, there's not yet been a Democrat who has spoken admirably about Hegseth as this nominee or indicated that they would support him. Most have told him to his face that they consider him to be unqualified, that they don't think he is worthy of this position, and they're planning to vote against him. On the Republican side, it's been the complete opposite, where you've seen most of the Republican members who have spoken praise Hegseth, talk about how he's reformed, even though he's admitted to kind of past mistakes in terms of infidelity, drinking problems, financial mismanagement of organizations. And many of the Republicans are essentially deferring to President-elect Donald Trump, who has firmly stood behind Hegseth's nomination. So the questioning for Democrats especially has ranged kind of three different tiers of talking to Hegseth about these sexual assault allegations and sexual misconduct allegations that he's faced with. A lot of conversations about his excessive drinking and how that's potentially going to impact his job performance. He claims he won't drink if he is confirmed to this position. And then just broadly painting him as unqualified for this because while he is a military veteran himself, he's never led a big organization or led troops in combat necessarily. And we've seen multi-star generals hold the position of Secretary of Defense in the past. So that's been the Democratic playbook, getting him both on the personal and the professional, while Republicans are mostly giving him a pass to talk about his biography and introduce himself to the country.
Taylor, thanks. Let's bring in political anchor Alex Cohen. So as Taylor was saying, there was a number of allegations against him. He's said that he has erred grievously in the past. All of this is relevant because it actually goes against the military code, but it doesn't seem to be giving the Republicans much pause about when it comes to confirming him.
No, that's right, Josh. And I think this is a clear indication of which party has the upper hand here. I think that, it's very interesting to contrast, for example, concerns raised about infidelity, blended families, all sorts of things. When Republicans brought these up about Kamala Harris and her husband, Doug Emhoff, they seem to be incredibly problematic. And now it seems as if, okay, Pete Hegseth has this narrative of being a reformed man. It's understandable what he has done. I also think it's striking how much has changed since 2018, the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. I think his confirmation gives them even more wind at their sails.
Okay, thank you so much, Alex. And let's turn now to Tim Boyum. A lot of discussion as we've been talking about how unconventional Pete Hegseth is. So can you discuss just very briefly the typical backgrounds of a Secretary of Defense?
Well, I think, the average person sitting at home thinks these folks are probably, former four-star generals, and that's the type of person that leads these organizations. But that's not always the case. In fact, there are ones that have not served in the military in the past. And I think what we've heard today at this hearing, it's less of a concern about him leading the military. And what we just heard there was him not leading large organizations. This is a massive organization, some 3 million people that he would lead. And they seem to be targeting more about his lack of experience of running any organization rather than just the military. And so I think that's been a focal point today, not necessarily just the military background that probably most people at home think of as former generals that will lead the Secretary of Defense.
Very briefly, do you think that he has the votes, Taylor?
I think he does because Republicans have control of the Senate 53 to 47. Up to 3 Republicans can vote against him. It's not an indication that there are 3 that will, and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance will still be able to break the tie. So unless there's a surprising Republican revolt, it looks like he's on track.
Q23, thanks so much for your time and political insight. Best in the business, and thank you at home for watching. I'm Josh Robin. More news right now here on Spectrum News.
Spectrum News Plus. Local stories, connecting communities. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum subscription.
For the millions of school-aged children across the country, the state of their schools can have a lasting impact on their health and well-being.
The majority of school districts aren't doing comprehensive regular water quality testing.
As CO2 levels rise in a space, cognitive function takes a direct decline.
We visit 2 school districts working to create safe and healthy environments for their students.
Watch Exploring Your Health, Curing Our Classrooms. Available on the Spectrum News app.
You put in unlimited hours and unlimited passion because your small business has